We're used to travelling to conferences, and I think it's just an honour and a privilege to be given the opportunity to bring the world here.
Here we were, practising lawyers, never done anything like this before. How do we go about bidding for a conference and securing?
We're used to travelling to conferences, and I think it's just an honour and a privilege to be given the opportunity to bring the world here.
Here we were, practising lawyers, never done anything like this before. How do we go about bidding for a conference and securing a conference?
So when we first met the team from Tourism New Zealand, they explained to us their conference assistance program. We also did a feasibility study, and to make sure that this exercise is going to be a financial success.
We really did need that expertise in terms of the budgeting and to have a degree of confidence that we could actually run it at a profit.
Straight away they let me know about the necessity of having a really beautiful document for bidding, and they helped me put that together. They had professionals on hand the whole way. They told us that they would pay for me to fly to the conference venue in 2014 and make the bid.
The presentation material we had definitely got us over the line. The material we took has become a template for all future bids. It's been quite an extraordinary exercise.
I think as a country we have a good reputation for being warm and welcoming to all our visitors.
They know that they'll have an experience here that they can't have almost anywhere else in the world. Like, the whole city got behind this conference. It really wasn't just myself and my co-organiser, but also what was really important was making connections with other academics around the country and internationally, because it allowed me to expand my academic work. Now I have an editor collection that has come out of the papers that were presented at the conference.
It is the opportunity to contribute to leadership at a global level.
In the event, we got just under 800 registrations, and for us, that was a brilliant result. Certainly we had an increase in New Zealand membership, which is good in terms of future participation.
We actually made, for an arts and humanities conference, a fairly healthy profit.
For anyone out there who would like to host a conference, have the courage to host it, and then approach partners like Tourism New Zealand, because they have the skill to be able to support you.
It was good to have someone with that knowledge and expertise behind us to point us in the right direction, towards the right people and the right organisations that were able to help us work through the detail, really.
We were inexperienced in terms of bidding and hosting a conference. The material that was put together by Tourism New Zealand, the financial support they gave us and the confidence they gave us was just absolutely invaluable.
If anyone was interested in hosting a conference, particularly academics, I would say go ahead. It's a lot of work, but you're supported the entire way. It's incredible in terms of your professional reputation, and really important projects come out of that work as well that you can then develop further in your career.
We're used to travelling to conferences, and I think it's just an honour and a privilege to be given the opportunity to bring the world here.
Here we were, practising lawyers, never done anything like this before. How do we go about bidding for a conference and securing a conference?
So when we first met the team from Tourism New Zealand, they explained to us their conference assistance program. We also did a feasibility study, and to make sure that this exercise is going to be a financial success.
We really did need that expertise in terms of the budgeting and to have a degree of confidence that we could actually run it at a profit.
Straight away, they let me know about the necessity of having a really beautiful document for bidding, and they helped me put that together. They had professionals on hand the whole way. They told us that they would pay for me to fly to the conference venue in 2014 and make the bid.
The presentation material we had definitely got us over the line. The material we took has become a template for all future bids. It's been quite an extraordinary exercise.
I think as a country we have a good reputation for being warm and welcoming to all our visitors.
They know that they'll have an experience here that they can't have almost anywhere else in the world. Like, the whole city got behind this conference. It really wasn't just myself and my co-organiser, but also what was really important was making connections with other academics around the country and internationally, because it allowed me to expand my academic work. Now I have an edited collection that has come out of the papers that were presented at the conference.
It is the opportunity to contribute to leadership at a global level.
In the event, we got just under 800 registrations. And for us, that was a brilliant result. Certainly we had an increase in New Zealand membership, which is good in terms of future participation.
We actually made, for an arts and humanities conference, a fairly healthy profit.
For anyone out there who would like to host a conference, have the courage to host it, and then approach partners like Tourism New Zealand, because they have the skill to be able to support you.
It was good to have someone with that knowledge and expertise behind us to point us in the right direction, towards the right people and the right organisations that were able to help us work through the detail, really.
We were inexperienced in terms of bidding and hosting a conference. The material that was put together by Tourism New Zealand, the financial support they gave us and the confidence they gave us was just absolutely invaluable.
If anyone was interested in hosting a conference, particularly academics, I would say go ahead. It's a lot of work, but you're supported the entire way. It's incredible in terms of your professional reputation, and really important projects come out of that work as well that you can then develop further in your career.
We're used to travelling to conferences, and I think it's just an honour and a privilege to be given the opportunity to bring the world here.
Here we were, practicing lawyers, never done anything like this before. How do we go about bidding for a conference and securing a conference?
So when we first met the team from Tourism New Zealand, they explained to us their conference assistance program. We also did a feasibility study, and to make sure that this exercise is going to be a financial success.
We really did need that expertise in terms of the budgeting, and to have a degree of confidence that we could actually run it at a profit.
Straight away, they let me know about the necessity of having a really beautiful document for bidding, and they helped me put that together. They had professionals on hand the whole way. They told us that they would pay for me to fly to the conference venue in 2014 and make the bid.
The presentation material we had definitely got us over the line. The material we took has become a template for all future bids. It's been quite an extraordinary exercise.
I think as a country we have a good reputation for being warm and welcoming to all our visitors.
They know that they'll have an experience here that they can't have almost anywhere else in the world. Like, the whole city got behind this conference. It really wasn't just myself and my co-organiser, but also what was really important was making connections with other academics.
Seems like about a month's worth of events have been pushed into 1 week, and that then this is about the only day out of the America's Cup that there isn't any racing. So everybody's got a lot to do today. So we're very grateful for you to turn up and support us. We've got a live stream on Facebook as well, where we've got a number of people watching this event. Just a little bit about the High Performance Yacht Design Conference. We run it every 3 years. So we've had a technical conference this morning with delegates throughout the world, both in person and presenting online. We're very grateful to Tourism New Zealand for sponsoring this conference predominantly, and to our kind of family of four, well, I think we'll claim that phrase, North Sails, Gurit, Southern Spars and Doyle Sails, who've been with us over a number of years and have provided essential support so that we can run it. Thank you very much. So really, part of what we do as the conferences, we try and put on this event because we're all engineers in the high performance yacht design world. Most in this room are some way in connection with the local marine industry or just interested sailors. So rather than just seeing these boats sailing around the water, we want to learn more about how they can sail around the water. What are the novel things on board? How are they different from the AC50s? You know, we've got this amazing new class. So I'm going to hand over to Peter Montgomery, who's very kindly offered to MC the evening, and he's going to introduce our panelists from each of the teams. Thank you, Peter.
Greetings. Thank you, David, and it's great to be back, having been involved in many of the high-performance HPYD editions in the past, where we've had Volvo stopovers and America's Cup, and it's just great. This panel discussion is going to be, as David said, on the technology used in the America's Cup. And if you've got any questions, we'll welcome you to put your hand up. First, over here on the left in our panel from American Magic is Silvio Araveni, and we'll get them all to tell us what their specific role is. And then alongside here is Will Bakewell from INEOS. And here we've got Martin Fisher from Luna Rossa. And from ETNZ is Bobby Kleinschmidt down over here. So, we'll encourage questions in a moment, and we have, with the damned online thing and this whole COVID thing's frustrating. I won't get too political, but I do wonder how you can get on a plane today and go and land in Sydney or Melbourne and not go through quarantine, yet you can't go to North Head and watch a yacht race here in Auckland. Hopefully the people running New Zealand will decide tomorrow that we can by the weekend at the latest. And so we were expecting, David, at least 300 people here tonight. And as we've had, what in the first Volvo, I think we had 350, didn't we? Or close to 400. There was a hell of a lot of people, and we'd have had a lot here tonight, but because of level 3 and we all know the reason, so we move right along. First, let's go to Silvio, and because I was at a function not long ago with Martin, and I basically made the point, all of these guys here could be working for NASA or SpaceX or, you know, what's happening at Mahia Peninsula with rocket launches and so on. I mean, these blokes are in another world. And so, because there's so many specifics, so on our panel, we'll get them to introduce specifically what they're doing. Silvio, your role, greetings, welcome, with American Magic has been?
Yeah, it was production coordinator. because the way we have divided our technical design and technical team was design as such as naval architecture and hydrodynamics and all that, which was coordinated by Adolfo Carrao from Boutin Partners, and then engineering systems and actually construction and all that, which was coordinated by me.
Right.
Yes.
And we'll come back to you and we'll all get you to ask this question. When you were told after Bermuda and the multi on foils and you were going to a monohull on foils, what was your reaction? What was the biggest challenge? So we'll come back to you, but now we'll go to you, Will. What was your key role in INEOS?
So really it was to be responsible for the flight control of the yacht. So in the beginning with our test boat, that was autopilot for making sure that we could get on the water and go sailing as soon as possible. And then that becomes more making sure that the sailors' manual inputs to the controls are best used for stable flight. And alongside that, it becomes quite important to be the sort of design lead who's chatting to the sailors, making sure that they're getting what they want. So a bit of everything, really.
The flight controller, boy, we've come a long way since 12 metres off Fremantle, or of Newport was my first, let alone the version 5 boats. Now, a very nice welcome to Martin Fisher from Luna Rossa. Can you give us a potted summary of your key role in?
Yes, I'm the the co-design coordinator of Luna Rossa together with Orazio Carabelli. And I worked at the beginning of the campaign mainly on the overall concept of the boat, on the direction in which we wanted to go, also on the tools, so not the development of tools, but what kind of tools we wanted to use. So in general, on the overall concept and overall research direction, let's say. And then in the second half, I worked also a lot on the rules.
It's a quirky happenstance. Have you noticed we've got Team New Zealand and Luna Rossa sitting beside each other? That was completely unintentional, as they just happened to sit there, or perhaps these fellows took the earlier seats, whichever way you look at it. That's my sense of humour for what it's worth. Right now we go along to Bobby, and your role in Emirates Team New Zealand has been?
Yeah, mainly focusing on the hull design and the foil design. So I lead the appendage design team, and I also did a lot of work on the hull shape, designed the shapes of the 3 boats that we built this campaign.
Right. Well, now, as I said, we'll go back to Silvio and then we'll go through the panel again and open it up to questions. So there was Bermuda multi-foiling, because we know it was a retroactive foiling in San Francisco, but there the idea of the foils up in Bermuda, and then after the protocol we hear there is going to be a foiling monohull. What was your reaction at the time, thinking, whoa, hell, if I'm involved in this design stuff, where do I go from here? What was the biggest challenge could you see coming?
Well, first of all, in the beginning, I wasn't sure what that meant, because we all heard it was going to be monohulls, back to monohulls. Luna Rossa was involved again and all that, and people were starting to gear up in the TP52 class and the Maxi 72. So this is back in 2017. So then when it came out, the flying monohull, we said, oh, it's a bit of a joke in a way. We're doing the catamarans, but in monohulls. And then I think we were amongst the first ones to launch the test boat, our mule, what we call the mule. Then we started validating the concept, and it was just, we were blown away. It was amazing. And here, when we had the first racing in the World Series in December, I think we all were super excited by the potential of the class, which was, very performing and top technology, as well as match racing involved, especially in pre-start. So, in the beginning it was a bit like that, but then as we built a smaller boat, we sort of got a bit.
And Will, your reactions all very well to have an idea and put it on paper, but to put it into practical reality, what did you think when you were first told?
I think really for me in my world, it was we were really trying to see whether the boat would handle stably. You get presented this picture in the class rule and the protocol, and you've got to go from that to working out how it would respond to a gust, how it would respond to changes of input, all of those things that lead to a stable flight. And so you model it and go through that process. And there's still this element of doubt that this sort of two legs on the stool is going to work. but I guess that process of modeling and then validating with a test boat is proved that, and the racing that we see now proves that it's a concept that
Absolutely.
it's got legs, if only two.
And to you, Martin, what do you think the biggest challenge when you were told, hell, we've just been working on multi-hulls, now we're going to this in a completely different world. The biggest challenge you thought we faced was?
Well, we were involved together with Team New Zealand, of course, in the development of that of the class for this America's Cup, and so at the beginning we worked on different concepts. Team New Zealand as well, and Team New Zealand was clearly ahead of us because they had already some models in the simulator. They presented us different models, and there we could see in the simulator how it worked. We could even sail it. Well, virtually, but we could sail it. So we very quickly we got very confident that this would work, and then we got straight into the details. So for us, I guess the situation was a bit difficult. Different. We didn't have any doubts that would work. Because we worked right from the beginning together with Team New Zealand on the development of that class. We needed basically to almost design a complete boat, at least roughly, to be able to write the rules.
And Bobby, when you were told, I mean, being part of Team New Zealand, you'd be aware that there's, the concept on the computer could maybe work and so on. But what was your reaction?
Yeah, well, I guess initially I was only told that we had to come up with some sort of 75-foot monohull, and that's a pretty broad specification, I guess. So initially it was trying to figure out what the coolest, fastest 75-foot monohull could actually be, and convince other people that it could be a fully foiling boat by setting up simulator models and sort of going through and working with the sailors to figure out how to come up with a concept that would get around the track. So yeah, it was really from the very beginning that we were sort of focused on trying to make this concept work. But at the same time, you're never really sure until we saw the test boats from NES and American Magic. I can tell you that was pretty relieving that those actually worked. It's been a long process of trying to understand how to really optimize the boat for performance as well.
Well, I recognize a lot of faces here, and I know there's a lot of inquiring minds. So if there are any questions you'd ask, and also, I'm not sure whether I said before, but when we were hoping of a lot more people in person before the latest COVID lockdown, we do have an awful lot of people still watching online. So through David, there will be questions coming online as well. So has anybody got any questions you'd like to ask our panel? Yes, sir. If you could just turn up the volume for us, thank you. Oh, thank you.
I think while we've seen that there's been differences in the area of the main foils, there also is a lot of difference in the actual root chord, of the foils. And you would note that the Prada Lunarossa runs a greater root chord than, for example, Team New Zealand. And what I wanted to understand was, is there any influence on that chord length in terms of stability on the main foils in flight? And is there any influence of actually the natural pitching CM of the foil shape itself? Does that in any way influence the value?
Can you just keep the microphone closer? Thank you, because there's echo, quite a lot of echo in the room. Not only for you, but future speakers. Thank you.
Does that influence the, the actual root chord, length of the root chord or not? The natural pitching moment of the foil section itself?
Who would you like that question? Who you'd directing?
Bobby?
I guess in terms of stability, the position of the foil relative to the boat is fixed in the rule. It has to be symmetric, and basically the whole foil cant system is one design. So the position that the foil can move within is basically fixed as well. So I don't think there's a big influence on the planform shape of the foil on the stability, or even the what we call the bronzer shape or the anhedral. it's sort of all, yeah, more or less fixed by the parameters in the rule. So yeah, I'm not sure. There's a lot of trade-offs in terms of stability there.
Let's see if anybody else, Martin, can you just make or we'll go to Silvio as well, a quick comment on that as well?
I fully agree with what Bobby said. I think the influence on pitch stability or instability in general is minor.
Yeah, yeah. You're a foiling man, surely. Here.
I think, yeah, I totally agree as well. What matters more on those flight stability aspects is where the foil is placed rather than where that foil center of effort is, rather than its chord. But I'm no hydrodynamicist, so
yeah.
But from a stability point of view, that's
so talking to Silvio about the foil, it's not only that, where people have been looking now, taking shots from yesterday on the size of the jibs, the places of the mast, where the foils are placed, all of those things. But maybe you can just answer the question to.
Yeah, I think one of the point was mentioned was also the chord length and the section shape. Obviously, the 4 teams have decided to go with 4 different solutions in terms of anhedral, in terms of chord length and all that. And like they say, there are several ways to skin the cat. I guess that is the bottom line. Who knows? I think there is a very interesting race going on between anhedral with Una Rossa and flat or horizontal, how you want to call it, with Team New Zealand. And I think you watch them sailing. They both are very stable. They both look very locked in. So is that coming from the foils or not necessarily? So I think it's very new territory for all of us, and we just hoping this class can continue in the future. Maybe we'll get to learn a bit more. Yeah.
Okay, now I hope you can all hear okay, and there's not too much echo. You can hear. The other day I was at a function and he said, "Can you hear me down the back?" And there's a guy in the middle. He said, "Yes, I can. And if there's anybody who can't, I'm happy to go back and let them fit in." So just as long as you can hear us okay. Right, now we've got an online from David, and either could, not only to David, but others, if you want to direct a question specifically to one of our panel, do so, or it could be a general question. They can all answer just so they have. Right, this is our first online question from David.
So good question. Got a question come in from one of our sponsors from Southern Spars. If the class is kept for the next America's Cup, what parts of the rule would you like to see opened up? And then are there parts of the rule that are currently limiting the top speeds or the performance of these boats? And I guess that's probably to everybody.
All right, well, we'll start. I don't want to pick on you all the time, Sylvia, but since you're the first one, we'll work through what the key point is, what part, if it stays, the AC75 stays, what part of the rule would you like to be opened up is the key point, and
do you feel that there are any parts of the rule that are currently limiting the performance significantly?
Right, okay.
So on the open up side, I think there is plenty open already. Even if there are one design parts, of course, but there is plenty open, and these design teams are very, busy, and 40 people in all the design teams. I have heard rumors that there is maybe a desire to try and maybe do a bit more of one design parts in an effort to contain cost or whatever, especially in items that are already pretty similar between the boats. So in that respect, I don't think that we'll see, but it may be closing more than opening in the future, I think, from what I hear. As far as the limiting the speed, I don't think that is in the rule or is a rule limitation, but certainly I'm not the aerodynamic expert here at the table, so maybe these guys will chime in a bit more. I don't think it's a matter of rule. I think it's a matter of the physics of how the foils and all that are conceived, but
Right, we'll carry on with the panel. You next, Will. And
yeah, so I think there's quite a lot of rule-driven complexity in terms of how we lay out our systems, and therefore how we have to measure our systems. And I'm not sure that that rule-driven complexity actually stops. It doesn't prevent in itself people from cheating, from doing anything underhand. And therefore, if it doesn't do that, there's a question as to whether it's necessary or not. I'm obviously not saying that people should be able to get away with anything at all, but just that we should be careful that we're not introducing complexity for the sake of measurement. You know, splitting systems up, making sure that everything's separated when it doesn't actually achieve the main result, the main aim of that whole section of the rule, which is to prevent.
Is man made to suit the rules, or rules made to suit man, sort of thing?
Yeah, and just really that it adds massive overhead to be able to go and make sure that all of your systems are compliant.
Yeah.
Before you race, and if we could ease that, then that might be a good thing.
Right.
You know, without taking away from the sort of.
And Martin, you may have an opinion on the systems and all the structure.
Well, in general, on the rules, to answer those two questions, I agree with Silvio and Will that I also would agree. Yeah, I would say I don't see any necessity to open the rule any further. More the contrary, it probably would be beneficial to simplify a few parts that just such that the whole thing becomes a bit less complex. And then in terms of rule parameters that drive performance, I think there's one, and we discussed that during the development of the rules quite intensively. That's actually the distance between the center of gravity, or the position of the center of gravity and the position of the foil. That's really a parameter that limits the righting moment in the end, and that therefore limits quite efficiently the performance of the boats. And I think also for safety reasons, we should keep that where it is.
Have you got a thought, Bobby?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I agree that there's probably a lot of things in the rule that can be simplified, and it doesn't really need to be opened up any more than it already is. I think when, in the process of defining the parameters for the boat that are in the rule, you sort of have to leave it open enough that when it's a totally new type of boat, you've got enough scope to develop it into whatever it's going to become. And we didn't really know what the boats were going to look like when we wrote the rule. And I think now that the boats are kind of converging a little bit on what they should look like, then it would probably help to tighten up some of the rules and get rid of some of the different options that you need to look at when you start your research and development program. In terms of things limiting the speed of the boat, I guess one sort of design trade-off as far as the rule is concerned is basically how much stability the boat has when it's at rest, basically. So there's effectively the vertical center of gravity of the boat is governed by the weight of the foils and the weight of the rig. And there's a few restrictions on the hull shape that kind of give the boat a certain amount of stability at very low speed, and also help the boat to come back upright after capsize. And my sort of question is, how important is that design consideration for the class? And the main thing, for example, is the mass of the foil. So the foil wings themselves have an exact weight that they have to measure in at. And so, all the teams are trying to do whatever they can to increase the density of the foil to make the, sort of shrink down the volume and not have any extra wetted area. So if you sort of accepted the fact that the boats were going to be maybe a little bit more difficult to flip back up after a capsize, but you've got the chase boat there anyway, could you afford to accept a slightly higher vertical center of gravity when the foils are down and take some mass out of the foils? Maybe. And I think sort of going down that route, if you could take out a bit of weight, there's various types of ballast in the foils and on the deck for measurement reasons. If you could get rid of a bit of weight, then I think the performance of the boats in the light wind, particularly kind of in the really marginal foiling conditions, would probably improve a bit. I'd like to see the sort of more thought being put into improving the takeoff performance of the boat in light wind, and maybe a little bit less on the kind of stability alongside the chase boat situation. But that's just my personal opinion.
Right, now, just reminding any more questions, just keep the mic close so we can hear it. And yes, I can see David, we've got a hand up there, thank you. And either address it to a specific panelist and or a group one as well. Thank you.
So this is actually for everybody. I'm intrigued to understand what each team has found the most challenging part of the design process for this round of the AC.
We'll start with you, Martin, if you like.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to keep picking on Silvio every time.
It's fine. It's fine. Well, everything was challenging. Yeah, because it was completely not only a new class, but a new boat, a new type of boat. So that nobody had any experience. But I think the control systems were especially challenging because you have to handle really big forces, big moments, and you're trying to do that with control systems that are as small as possible, because as Bobby pointed out, you want to make the foils as heavy as possible. So if you have bigger or bulky control systems, then that volume is lost and you cannot put lead in there. So you lose there. And so that was really, I think, for us at least, a very, very complex part of the design.
Bobby, have you got a comment on that?
Yeah, as Martin said, everything was super challenging. I guess could look at it just through the lens of the hull design. I think one of the challenging things about the hull design was sort of deciding how to trade off the light air takeoff performance, about being able to accelerate to foiling, versus the aerodynamics, versus having some form stability when it's a bit breezy and you want to accelerate from low speed. So yeah, we put a lot of effort into kind of looking at those trade-offs and trying to maybe guess what direction the other teams would go, and also yeah, kind of improve each angle without really giving up much in the other direction.
Will, can you add to that?
Yeah, I think for me it's really that we moved from the AC50, which had a far fewer degrees of freedom on the control surfaces, into this boat. You've suddenly got a huge amount more actuators that need increasingly finer control with the massive loads that Martin talks about. So it's firstly got increasingly complex, but also that drives a need to better integrate those systems into the wider, boat, the structure. That multidisciplinary aspect where you need to sort of, you basically all need to be talking to each other to know that you are integrating these complicated systems into the boat in the best possible way. Not only the way that controls the control surface in the way that you want it done, but does that in the most, the smallest or the lightest or whatever your particular control objective is there, or particular design objective is there.
Silvio, we've moved a long way from just the classic naval architect, haven't we?
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. That's why we felt to split the design team in two, right? Because for the same reason, back in 2007 with the V5s, it was 95% naval architecture in all the areas, whereas now is a good half of systems and engineering. So just to add of what my colleague said here, which I fully support, the complexity also in the reliability of the machines is like the nowadays cars. If the electronics, for example, doesn't work, the car wouldn't turn on and you are not able to drive. So one big challenge was, especially in the beginning, because everything gets moved very quickly on the boat and adjusted all the time at high speeds, high loads, high frequencies, everything. All the componentry, even the off-the-shelf componentry in hydraulics, for example, or mechanics, is not used in other classes to work at such high frequency with all the loads and all that. So to have a boat that was able to sail every day, like these guys are going to start now going out every day until one wins the series. So at the very beginning, 2 years ago, to be able to sail 2 or 3 days in a row was a huge accomplishment, just because of reliability of all the systems and of the machine in general. You know, even the foils, the amount of care they take, because at those high speeds, the minimum imperfection on the finish of the foil arm or the rudder or the wing, you know, would cavitate, would, you know, the guys on the boat would not be able to steer the boat. So in general, there is a huge amount of work required on a daily basis, which we can call in one word reliability. And that to me was, you know, a fascinating and yet very big challenge.
Yeah. Right, have we got, okay, we're back to David. This is.
I've got a question.
Yep.
I've got a question myself, Peter. Will kind of touched on it a little bit there. Back in Bermuda, we saw the cyclists giving Team New Zealand a significant advantage because they're providing basically all the power to move the sails, and because of the small accumulated hydraulics, the power to do the boards. This time we're seeing these amazing things come up in the air, and it's not quite obvious to a lot of people, me included, how that's all working. What are the grinders doing, and how have the changes in the accumulated power, and we've got batteries on board doing these things, I understand. Just give us a little bit of a rundown on how that works.
Because all we can see is R2-D2 helmets.
I'm trying to help Peter here, because when Team New Zealand are next time going to be
living in the past,
so far ahead, he's got to have something to talk about. So if he can tell us what's happening with the grinders, what are they doing on the boat?
So I guess it's easier to start with what the batteries are doing. And so we've got this one design CAN system, and that's moving the boards in and out of the water. And then there's a team designed system that is allowed to adjust with batteries and motors and accumulators, if you like, all of the underwater surfaces. So from that point of view, that's the end of the battery. You move above the water, and that's where you're deciding whether to put your grinder power directly into a control surface, directly into the cylinder, or to store that grinder power hydraulically in an accumulator. And the accumulators are one design part. So there's an amount of energy storage there, dependent on what pressure you choose to run your system. And in addition to that, you've got any direct drive that you choose to supply to a winch. So which is harder to store, obviously.
No, it's a good question, and I'd love to get an answer from them all, because when you think the foils and the wings are so much more heavier, and we find, say, Ineos decided they could get away with 6 blokes, as opposed to others that want to have 8. Some are looking outwards, some are looking forward aft. I mean, the whole thing was different compared to what we had in Bermuda with cyclors. Now we've got these guys, you can't even see what they're doing. Silvio, you give us an idea in terms of what was in Bermuda and the battery power and store and the huge weight, exactly what David touched on. I'd love, and we'll give it to the other fellows as well, there's a hell of a lot more weight in what you're doing, just the logistics of it all.
Yeah, so in Bermuda, there was a lot of grinding going on because everything was manual. And so the boards and all that was all manual, and board up, board down, all that. Here, because obviously the forces and the weights and the masses are much bigger, it's all electric. So one could say, okay, now the grinders have an easy life because they only doing the sailing functions. But because everything is adjusted so frequently, for example, the Traveler, the main sheet Traveler, that's a huge one. You know, then each trimmer has a different style, but the main sheet Traveler is a huge one. The main sheet, all the control system for the main itself, camber, decamber, and all that, especially in the light for the takeoff and all that. So these guys are going and going and going and going. And the accumulator in Bermuda was one of the points that was also displayed in the graphics, because it was a pivoting point of how much pressure, how much power the guys were producing, and how much they had available. Here, I think this changed because the flight control is all done, it's all powered. So there is, it's different, but still the sailing functions are absorbing a lot of power. Yes, and it goes with the style. Each team does it differently, but that is still pretty big.
I'd love you two to add to that too, because I'm mystified. We only see really the 3 in the back and none of the others. And where's all the battery power and what we've discussed, the huge weights. I'm sure you both can add to it. Martin, you go first.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Yeah, absolutely. In Bermuda, there were times when people were sort of running out of hydraulic pressure and weren't able to get the boards up and down or adjust the rake of their boards, and especially early on in the racing, I guess. And yeah, it sort of made it a bit exciting, but also a little bit disappointing from a racing perspective, I guess. So yeah, I guess it's definitely more exciting in terms of match racing to have the foil cant system and the foil flap system not really reliant on the grinders, because it makes the boats more maneuverable. But then, as the other guys touched on, the sail controls being manually powered, there's a real sort of trade-off between how much trimming the guys do on board, and how much they sort of want to use the energy that's available to them. They sort of can use as much as the grinders can put out, but yeah, it's a bit more just a bit more interaction there, I guess, whereas the foils are kind of doing.
And Bobby, the thing I notice now, these grinders, and going back to Craig Monk and Andrew Taylor, say on NZL 32, now you see these guys and you're looking up at them, they're all 7-axe handles at the shoulders and they're all slim and thin and terrific. I mean, their aerobic fitness is just as good as you see any of these martial arts blokes. It's just amazing, isn't it? The grunt they can put out.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they're full-time professional athletes.
Yeah, yeah.
Been training for years to get to this point, and the better shape they're in, the more the guys can use the sail controls. And
Martin, have you got a comment for us on what these blokes are doing, hidden down, and add to?
Well, they have to produce lots of energy. Actually, I fully agree with what was said. So when we worked on the rule, we definitely wanted that the grinding power, let's say, becomes less of a limiting factor for maneuvering. So therefore, we decided that everything below the waterline is battery driven. But still, it's very, very hard, because especially if you're foiling upwind, you need to adjust the sail permanently, and that the loads on these boats are really huge. So there's lots of energy required to do that. So that's what these guys are doing. And for the maneuvers, the amount of energy that is needed is even bigger, because during the maneuver you ease the traveler and then you have to pull it back up again. Same the jib sheet, the main sheet a little bit. So the maneuvers are much more energy demanding than straight line sailing. But well, we call them grinders, but that's not all what they are doing. They also play a very active role during the maneuver. So one or two of the guys are trimming the jib, so they have to have a close eye on that. And then during the maneuvers itself, they also take over part of the control when for instance, when the mainsail trimmer switches. So they have plenty of work. It's not only grinding.
No, of course. Right, we must have some more questions. I'll just give an update before we look for the next question. You hear it first here. Just a minute, let me get this here. Right. Racing tomorrow, 12 March, will either be on course A or E. We are unable to make a determination tonight. The decision will be advised before 10:00 tomorrow. So there you go. That's the latest there. You've heard it first. Yes, sir, I can see David hasn't gone far. And just remember, use the mic and either direct to one person or all four if you wish.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for being here. So yesterday we saw the boats pretty much hit 50 knots, and there's rumors of higher speed. Obviously, cavitation is just a fact of life. When you're getting up there, it's not really an if. Could you speak on the difference between the Bermuda design, where you had some fluid structure interaction to control the board and some rake, but that's about it, and this cup where you have flaps and maybe some of the tools or strategies that help you deal with cavitation?
Okay, well, we'll go first, and then we'll do Martin, and then Bobby, and then Silvio. So that, right.
So I'm not going to directly answer your question, because I'm not a hydrodynamicist, so it won't be directly answering your question. But I think in that process, what you've gained is a significant amount more control. in terms of how you can shape that foil, and the choices that you need to make over, where you put your hinge position, all of those things. It's significantly more complex. And in order to get the hydrodynamic performance that you want to be able to shape that flap in a, you want as much authority over the shape of that flap as you can to be able to give the performance you want in different breezes and at different boat speeds. And that effectively has driven a range of solutions, which I think is a good thing for the class. And that is, it's also just become incredibly complex. How those flaps are moved, where that hinge line is, how many actuators you have, whether you choose to, if you have anhedral, whether to choose to run any differential between the two surfaces. That decision to go from a simple rake system, simple angle of attack of the foil, to a flap has opened up a huge amount of possibility, but also complexity.
All right, we'll go to Martin next, and then we'll go to Silvio and Will. Right, Martin.
Cavitation is definitely a very important factor. It's a limiting factor, and you have to somehow to choose the conditions, so the combination of speed and lift coefficient at which you accept the onset of cavitation. So you somehow have to choose the speed range in which you want your foil to operate, the speed range and the lift or load density range, and that's in itself is already a very difficult decision to take. And I would say that part or that aspect is more or less the same, or was the same, for the boats in Bermuda and for the boats here. So in both cases, you have to take a decision there. Then where there are differences is this time we have flaps. So last time we could only adjust the angle of attack. This time we cannot adjust the angle of attack, but only the flaps. And then in order to push the cavitation limits, for instance, a bit further, you want a certain flap shape. But this flap shape may require or may generate higher loads on the flap. So it could be that a flap shape that is better to avoid cavitation requires or generates higher loads. So you have to manage higher loads with your control system. That's more difficult. It requires a bigger control system that eats volume, so you can put less lead into it, and you have to find the right trade-off between the volume required by the required for the control systems and the pure performance in terms of drag and cavitation. So that was a very difficult and complex design loop.
Bobby, cavitation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a few major differences from now until since Bermuda. One is that the boats are certainly going a lot faster. So I think yesterday, the boats are going over 50 knots, and it wasn't really even that windy. And with a little bit more breeze, you would see speeds of over 40 knots upwind, and then high 40s or whatever downwind, which is a good chunk higher boat speed than the boats went to Bermuda. And I think that just means that you're close to cavitation for a lot more of the wind speed range than you were before. So yeah, it's definitely helpful with the flaps that you can basically kind of tune your flap angle and your camber distribution a bit for your boat speed to try to keep the foil in its sort of non-cavitating regime across different boat speed range. But another big difference since Bermuda is that the foils with their prescribed mass basically means that a lot of the structure of the foil can be steel, whereas last time the foils were all composite. So and plus the sort of T-foil configuration kind of really allows you to make the foil smaller or thinner than we were able to do on the 50. So the thinner you make the foil, the sort of easier it is to push into higher boat speeds for cavitation. So with the 50, especially with the more lighter boards, you're kind of looking at a lot of tip area and a very long span. And you've got to support that with the vertical part of the foil and then the elbow. And that's sort of the most critical part of the foil for cavitation and also the most critical part for structure. So there's a definite trade-off there in terms of how much your thickness is sort of fixed based on the tip that you've got to support, how much you want to increase the chord to improve the cavitation versus reducing the wetted area. So there's a bit less kind of pressure on the just purely the structural side of making the foil thinner with the new class.
Right, the final word on cavitation, another thing, Silvio.
Yeah, well, I lived all this from the system side and the engineering side. So certainly the challenge of that Martin was discussing or was describing about fitting all the control system in a very small volume, and also the interface with the foil arm, which is one design. I think all teams experienced initially a few, unknowns at the joint there, what some of us call the foot. So all that, I think, made for a huge ground of research and development. And the fact that 4 very good design teams have come out with 4 totally or very different solutions, I think that tells it all about the complexity and the different aspects of the topic. But certainly the systems, someone fit the actuators in the wings, someone fit the actuators in the foil arm, some in the bulb, some had the bulb, some didn't have the bulb. So all that, I think, is, from my perspective, my role was very, very fascinating and intricate in terms of being able to make it as compact, as small as possible, but yet efficient, because you're still producing power, not right there, but up in the boat. And so all that was, very, very fascinating. Yes.
Right, with this fascinating discussion and our panel is so forthcoming, we've got to keep the pace on here because time is getting into it. But we go back to David, and I think, David, have you got another online?
I've got an online question, which luckily allies with one I was going to ask anyway. One of the things I find fascinating is that in Bermuda, we had these amazingly complex twin element wings, very fragile, couldn't drop them, really took 50 people to get them into the boats. Now we've gone to this incredible double skin mainsail system, which again is one of those things it's very hard to see on the TV. So Bobby, the question is mainly to you. How did you come up with that concept? And do you see it trickling down into mainstream use?
Another very good question.
Yeah, I'll try my best. It's not something I'm massively involved in. Got burns here. Yeah, I think there was sort of a desire to try to have a boat that had a bit more kind of flexibility or relatability than a fixed wing, and what could you do to sort of have sails that go up and down. It's a bit more practical than a wing, really. So that was sort of the kind of initial design brief, I guess. And the twin skin main kind of opens up some options in terms of control systems and also kind of separating the two sides of the sail, giving some performance advantages over a single skin sail. Off the top of my head, I'm not really sure exactly where the crossovers are and what the differences are between a single skin and a twin skin sail. But I guess, with the wing, one of the big advantages of the wing is just the kind of range of shapes that you can put it through. And when you're actually sailing in a straight line, I'm not sure there's a massive difference in sort of the lift to drag ratio that you would get out of the wing versus the twin skin sail. I think everyone's pretty happy with just the way the concepts worked out. All the teams have kind of slightly different systems inside to adjust the camber and the twist of the sail. But in the end, I think everything's ended up kind of a bit simpler, really, than maybe initially imagined or what you could possibly do within the class rule. So it's sort of what I say. I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Okay. Right over here. Thank you. Just use that mic and.
Hi. So it's a question to everyone again. Today we see very different hull shapes and foil configurations. Should the rule be kept for the next America's Cup? Do you think there'll be a convergence, like everyone will imitate the winner of this cycle? Or do you think the playing field is so open that it's going to be quite different again for a few cycles?
Why don't we start with you, Will, for a start? And then we'll.
I think we should keep it in its, you know, in its larger form. Obviously, we've discussed what changes we could make, which, you know, there are definitely changes we could do to make things cheaper, make things more simple, whilst keeping the same technical challenge. And I guess with this, the key is the fact that we've reached 4 separate design solutions, 4 very separate design solutions here. So yes, there is room for convergence, but it also shows us that there's not one particular design concept that's leaps ahead of others. You know, those guys shared the racing yesterday with 2 reasonably different foil concepts, obviously to the naked eye, and they, you know, they have different trade-offs and different positives and different negatives. So I think that there is room there for further exploration, whether that's convergence or an ability to go off in different directions and explore different areas. Then I think both of those things are good, and this rule still allows that.
As opposed to you thinking, right, we can get away with 6 grinders, and these Hulk Hogan's doing it. These fellas have a couple of twin helmsmen and so on. Have you got a quick comment?
Yes, I think the answer is a first edition of the class, and history tells us that it will take a few iterations to converge. So I think that if you went again, not necessarily you will start with the hull shape of the winning boat. For sure, you will study that and analyze it and evaluate that, but not necessarily you would pick that right now. Also because the hull shape is one of the components. Then there is the appendages, then there is the aero package. So I hope it remains this rule, and it's good that we can evaluate so different concepts, but I think there is more to discover.
Bobby, have you got a comment? Then Martin, wrap up.
Yeah, I think it's great that, you know, you can have boats that both the hull shape and the foil shape, you know, look so different that all sort of go pretty close to the same speed, which is pretty cool on the rule. You know, a lot of the main parameters of the foil are fixed, like we said, and I think that helps a lot in kind of keeping the boat speed similar. But the other thing is that having those sort of mass and also the center of gravity rule for the foil kind of, I think kind of gives you some different options about how to do things that maybe have some sort of subtle trade-offs that that just sort of almost by coincidence, the way the rule worked out, you can really have all these different foil concepts that we've seen and all go similar speed. So I think there's still plenty of scope for different solutions as far as the foils are concerned, which is exciting. The hull shapes you can see are kind of already starting to converge a little bit more, maybe. But there's also still a lot of trade-offs as far as the hull design is concerned. So yeah, certainly I'd expect the boats to look more similar, and be similar in speed going forward. But there's still plenty of room for looking at different options.
On this point, Martin, you can have the final word.
Well, I fully agree with was
yeah, just say I agree with
which was said so far. So yeah, I could stop here. Nevertheless, I continue a bit. No, I think it's really good that the rule is sufficiently open to allow for different foil and hull shapes. That makes it interesting also for the spectators. Actually, when the rule was developed between Team New Zealand and us, that was an important aspect that we consciously wanted to achieve. So we wanted really that the rule was open enough to allow for different shapes such that spectators could really see the difference between the boats, not only a different painting. Because last time in Bermuda, the platforms were all the same, the wings also. Of course, there were many differences on the boats in Bermuda, on the foil shapes, on the cisterns and so on. But from outside, it was almost impossible to see any difference. So the only difference was really the paint job. And this time everybody can see the difference, and that generates, I think, lots of interest, that sparks discussion. So that's a good thing, I think. And of course, we see some convergence, but I still think there is enough room in the rule to that even in future. So in the future, in the second iteration, we'll still see some differences. For instance, for the hull shapes, there's a trade-off to be made between aerodynamics and takeoff to get foil borne. So an optimal hull shape for aerodynamics is different from an optimal hull shape for takeoff. So that's a decision to be taken. And for the foils, it's the speed range, the wind speed range, where you have to find the right trade-off. So I'm confident that even in the next iteration, we will still see some differences.
Interesting. Okay, here we go. We'll come to you in a moment, Sue. We've just got an online question. I know we're running out of time. Yeah, do you want to take, put your hand up, sir, so David can see you. Thank you. And then David will tell your man online that if you let the man online, we'll do the question. Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, the same thing, microphone close, and either to one of the panelists or a group question.
My question is more for American Magic and Ineos. I know you haven't had a lot of time to reflect, but is there something you wish you would have done differently, or you look at Emirates and Prada's boat and you wish you would have done as well? Or yeah, is there something you really would want to do differently if you do it again?
Yeah, well, I as far as the technical side of the team goes, I think we follow the path that we were convinced was the path we wanted to be on. So we have no regrets on the technical side, on the design, the production, engineering, and all that. Certainly, it was a bit unfortunate with COVID that we couldn't have the events before the Christmas Cup. So we couldn't have a way to gauge performance and all that, but not necessarily, and not only, although this is a technical forum, on the technical side, but also on the sailing side and how to sail the boats. Because one thing that, you know, coming out from Bermuda, the racing seemed to be in a cliche, you know, bouncing off the boundaries, reaching start, you know, and not necessarily match racing and tactics and this and that. Whereas, you know, I'm speaking generally, whereas here we've seen that whether it's for the conditions of Auckland and the race courses, whether it's because of the class, whether it's the upwind start, it's proper racing, you know. So in general, that is also another element of design. So as far as we were concerned, I think certainly we had the accident that was a bit of a sliding door for us. But you know, until then, until when we presented the boat on the starting line, you know, we got the rule whenever we two got the rule, which was a bit later. We did our best with the test boat. We built the first boat as soon as we could and launched it. We did the second one. So we, you know, with what we had and the people we had and the time we had, I think we have no regrets on that side. Yeah, for sure.
I think from our point of view, the idea that you can choose a component of someone else's yacht and bring it into yours, which is effectively what you might be asking, infers that there is a silver bullet for performance. And I think this round has demonstrated that or this edition of the Cup has demonstrated that it's a cohesive whole that matters. So yes, there might be elements of design that we would take from the sail, from the hull, from the foil shapes, but it's about taking a cohesive package and putting it together and executing it very well. So while we would take some of those things, there is no one that stands out.
And that comes, Martin, to the point you're making, how the systems were just so complex and complicated in terms of coming back to just what's been said, you've got to sort of incorporate it all. Yeah. Have you got anything to add or subtract to what we've heard on that?
Yeah, no, really. I mean, I agree. It's about how you put the whole package together. I think, at the moment, wouldn't really say I would change a whole lot on our boat, but got definitely learning a lot and got plenty of ideas for next time as well if there's next time.
I've got one. Sorry, I was just going to turn that. My question was going to turn that on its head, really. Looking at the whole process has been a novel design. Surrogates have been launched at different sizes at different times. Everybody's launched their first boat at different times. Internally, I'm sure the design processes have been very different. Really quickly going through the panelists, what would you say has been the fundamental thing that you've been super happy with? You'd look back at your process and say, I'm so glad we did this. What's been the key driver of your campaign?
Right, we'll go with you, Bobby, for a start.
You can tell us about.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nothing can. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of speaking more from my own side of things. I guess the decisions on where to focus on for the hull shapes. So boat 1 is sort of meant to be a test platform for developing the foils, really. So I think it was important that we had a boat that kind of performed when it's in the water, pretty well, so that we could kind of make the right decisions about how much lift you need in a takeoff situation and that sort of thing. And then boat 2 is about kind of, as I mentioned before, trying to find the best trade-off between the aerodynamics and the hydrodynamics. So I think that part of it, went pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out.
Martin?
I think also for us, it was, it's not necessarily the key element of the overall design, but the hull was very important for us because I'm very happy about that, because it takes a long time to build a hull. So it takes 8 to 9 months to get that done. And therefore you have to take at a very early stage a decision on the hull shape, and it's almost impossible to correct it. And we were quite happy about the decision that we took about our first hull design. It was a difficult decision because, well, the hull with this bump at the bottom, that is a bit strange, and we were hesitating. I think it was risky. In the end, we were quite happy that we went that way, and that allowed us to focus then on other parts for the development.
Will?
I think for us, it was really all of the decisions in systems and control that allowed us to free up Giles and Ben to do, proper tactical match racing.
Yeah.
So we had, an efficient system that allowed us to have 6 grinders. So we had 5 in our afterguard. We had robust control. We had, people really focusing on their individual element of control, and we had people looking out of the boat. And I think that really helped us in the round robins, and I think that is really the element that we would say.
Silvio, last word on this particular.
For us, one of the key moments was deciding and executing on the test boat, the mule. For us, that was, since we started the campaign, we were ahead of the plans in the beginning. Then the decision to make that and do it and launch it and sail it for many, many days, that was really, really good to a certain extent, because then it was good to change and move to the big boat. Although we were not very impressed with our first hull shape, but still, the dynamics and the systems of the big boat, the manual power as opposed to the powered electric power was a good transition. But that was a key point of the campaign.
David, I know, excuse me, doing the housekeeping here. Can I ask just one more question? Because I know we're
you go for it, Peter.
Yeah, okay. Right. Well, I would like to start with Silvio and Will for a start. Based on what you saw yesterday, does that give you an overview in terms of that 10 to 14, maybe 15 knots? Does it give you an overview in terms of the overall ability of the boats from 7 to 21 or 2 knots? Or can you see something that, as we know, Luna Rossa was very quick in the Prada Cup in the light air conditions? Has there been a trade-off for them to be that competitive yesterday? Because John Bilger from Predict Wind is predicting it's going to be light to marginal on Saturday and maybe Sunday. So there's could be good breeze tomorrow, but Saturday could be problematic. So it's a long-winded way. You get to the point of saying it could be light, and what we saw yesterday, are you expecting to see something different? Or if we eventually get heavier here? So
until we were sailing, American Magic was sailing until mid-January, and we were out there every day, and we were watching everyone else. Team New Zealand seemed to us that it was faster of all the challengers. Whereas yesterday, watching from TV, for whatever the reason, I personally saw a relatively close races. And that, in part, in my opinion, is because obviously Luna Rossa has been developing through the Challenger Series, and so getting a lot of racing in, a lot of practice in a way. And certainly they're in an exceptional state of form. So, I think we're in for a very exciting series. And in the light, certainly Luna Rossa has been the best so far. Also, not only for the package they have, but also the way they developed the technique to sail in the light. I'm looking forward to see Team New Zealand, and I think they have improved as well. So, close racing.
Yeah, I think the idea that Luna Rossa is strong in the light is very true. We experienced that the hard way. But I don't think we've seen New Zealand in the light. In a racing format. No. So I don't think we can really make too strong conclusions from what we can see. They could probably tell you more.
Yeah. They probably could, but
but we won't do that.
Yeah. All right, so we get tomorrow. Well, based on what you saw yesterday in 10 to 14, maybe occasional 15. I mean, going down, it could be light, certainly on Saturday. I mean, is it going to come to the jockeys on the boat, putting the boat in the right, after all your intellectual grunt and knowledge and all the teams you've got and all of the university qualifications you've got for all of the stuff, does it actually come to the final of a great horse race and the jockey putting it in the right place? Or are you confident what you saw yesterday, you got a boat to go up and down the scale from 17 to 20 knots?
Well, we definitely were happy with what we saw yesterday. I think we saw two boats that were quite even. We saw a real sailboat race. And I think also for the next days, we can accept real close and real racing. I think it will, to answer your question, I think in the end it will come down to the sailors.
It won't be a bad thing in the end, will it? I mean, with respect, look, I've got great admiration for you guys and wonder why you're not all working in the space industry. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Luna Rossa looks good in the light, and definitely the racing so far has been very exciting. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of technique in the light, and also a lot of kind of things in terms of the design of the boat that aren't necessarily all that obvious. So I think with all the development that our guys have done in the past few months in those sort of conditions, then yeah, I think they're feeling pretty confident.
And based on what John Bilger's saying and other forecasters, it could be light to marginal. It will be a question then of who's going to get up on the foils closer to 7. I've been bewildered why you can start at 6.5 knots and no boat since the Christmas Cup has got up at 6.5 knots. So, maybe it'll be closer to 7. And we'll be watching you two closely, and you design gurus. And is someone going to do it at 7.23? And because when a break's a break, I mean, is that what? Just give me a hint in the broadcast booth to comment. What is that's got to be a key on Saturday, particularly if it's light. That's what we've got to be looking for, isn't it? Who can get up and stay up?
Yes.
You both agree. It's as simple as that. Have I answered the question already?
Yeah. I think if it's
all right. Well, look, we could go to midnight, I know, but I don't want to outstay my welcome. A very, very special thank you to Silvio and Will also, and of course to Bobby and Martin. Thank you, and to all of you. And I know there's been a lot of people online who, for whatever reason, are not here, and it's so frustrating to David and his team with HPYD number. Oh, there's no 7 there. There is up here, yeah. And this follows all of the brilliant opportunities that people would like to have to see these. But it's so different to some of the earlier days. I mean, we're in space age stuff now, and you know, if I hear any of you or your colleagues are going to be working down at Mahia Peninsula or for SpaceX or NASA or something, I won't be surprised. It's I just applaud you in awe of the intellectual grunt you bring to it all. It's just been absolutely fantastic. So to David and your team, thank you for organising this, but more importantly for all of you here tomorrow. And I've told you, haven't I? It's either course E or A. Well, you know, we can all drop a note to Jacinda and the intellectual giants running the country and say, well, it could be off North Head tomorrow too, but it won't be. But anyway, hopefully on Saturday. But thank you all. And people now can go to the bar and mix and mingle. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, the bar's going to be open for a little while. And to show our gratitude for you all turning up, it'll be free for a little bit until the treasurer tells us to stop. So get in quick. I'd just like to reiterate Peter's thanks to our panelists, 2 of which are right in the thick of it and 2 of which are probably wishing they were still back on holiday. So thank you all for giving up your time. And obviously, we're so grateful to have Peter here. Just vast experience and able to bring these kinds of discussion alive. So thank you very much, all of you. We've got a little token of our appreciation at the back, but if you'd all like to give them a large round of applause, please.
We're used to travelling to conferences, and I think it's just an honour and a privilege to be given the opportunity to bring the world here.
Here we were, practicing lawyers, never done anything like this before. How do we go about bidding for a conference and securing a conference?
So when we first met the team from Tourism New Zealand, they explained to us their conference assistance program. We also did a feasibility study, and to make sure that this exercise is going to be a financial success.
We really did need that expertise in terms of the budgeting and to have a degree of confidence that we could actually run it at a profit.
Straight away, they let me know about the necessity of having a really beautiful document for bidding, and they helped me put that together. They had professionals on hand the whole way. They told us that they would pay for me to fly to the conference venue in 2014 and make the bid.
The presentation material we had definitely got us over the line. The material we took has become a template for all future bids. It's been quite an extraordinary exercise.
I think as a country we have a good reputation for being warm and welcoming to all our visitors.
They know that they'll have an experience here that they can't have almost anywhere else in the world. Like, the whole city got behind this conference. It really wasn't just myself and my co-organiser, but also what was really important was making connections with other academics around the country and internationally, because it allowed me to expand my academic work. Now I have an edited collection that has come out of the papers that were presented at the conference.
It is the opportunity to contribute to leadership at a global level.
In the event, we got just under 800 registrations. And for us, that was a brilliant result. Certainly we had an increase in New Zealand membership, which is good in terms of future participation.
We actually made, for an arts and humanities conference, a fairly healthy profit.
For anyone out there who would like to host a conference, have the courage to host it, and then approach partners like Tourism New Zealand, because they have the skill to be able to support you.
It was good to have someone with that knowledge and expertise behind us to point us in the right direction, towards the right people and the right organisations that were able to help us work through the detail, really.
we were inexperienced in terms of bidding and hosting a conference. The material that was put together by Tourism New Zealand, the financial support they gave us and the confidence they gave us was just absolutely invaluable.
If anyone was interested in hosting a conference, particularly academics, I would say go ahead. It's a lot of work, but you're supported the entire way. It's incredible in terms of your professional reputation, and really important projects come out of that work as well that you can then develop further in your career.